The Vorak were the most feared hunters in all of known space. They stood nearly 8 feet tall when fully grown. Their bodies were covered in thick black fur that absorbed light and made them invisible in shadows. Their claws could tear through starship hull plating. Their teeth were built to crush bone. Every species in the Galactic Council feared them. Every species kept their distance. When the humans first arrived at the Council, the representatives from dozens of worlds warned them about the Vorak. They told stories of entire colonies being hunted for sport. They spoke in whispers about the Vorak homeworld, a place called Kareth Prime, where the weak were eaten and only the strong survived. The human ambassadors listened politely and nodded their heads and said they understood the danger. Then Dr. Elena Vasquez volunteered to study the Vorak. The council thought she was insane. The Drelathi ambassador, a thin creature with silver skin and 6 eyes, told her that no xenobiologist had ever returned from Kareth Prime alive. The Korath representative, a massive being made of living stone, said that her bones would be decorating a Vorak warrior's tent within a week. Elena simply smiled and said she would take her chances. She arrived on Kareth Prime during the hunting season. The twin suns hung low in the purple sky, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. Elena stepped out of her shuttle and took a deep breath. The air smelled like copper and smoke. In the distance, she could hear the howling of the Vorak packs as they prepared for the night's hunt. The Vorak who greeted her was named Koreth. He was the pack leader, the strongest hunter in his region. He looked at Elena with his 4 yellow eyes and sniffed the air around her. She was small, he noted, weak, soft. She had no claws, no fangs, no thick hide to protect her fragile body. He wondered why the council had sent such an easy meal to his world. Elena spent her first week observing the pack from a safe distance. She took notes on their hunting patterns, their social structure, their communication methods. The Vorak communicated through a complex system of growls, barks, and body movements. Elena learned to recognize the difference between a greeting and a threat, between a call to hunt and a warning of danger. Koreth watched her watching them. He was curious about this human. She did not run when the hunters approached. She did not cry or beg for mercy. She simply sat in her little camp with her strange devices and wrote things down on her glowing tablet. Some of the younger warriors wanted to hunt her for sport, but Koreth forbade it. He wanted to understand why she showed no fear. The cubs were the first to approach her. There were 3 of them. They were the offspring of Koreth's second mate, Vila. They were young, only 2 cycles old, still learning how to hunt. Their fur was soft and gray, not yet darkened by age and experience. Their claws were sharp but small. Their eyes were wide with curiosity about the strange creature that had come to their world. Elena was sitting by her campfire when they first came close. She heard them moving through the rocks, trying to be quiet like their parents had taught them. But they were young and clumsy, and they knocked loose a few pebbles that rolled down the slope toward her. Elena did not move. She kept her eyes on her tablet and waited. The smallest cub was the bravest. Her name was Mira, though Elena would not learn this until later. Mira crept forward on her belly, her nose twitching as she smelled the strange scent of the human. Elena smelled like nothing she had encountered before. There was no fear in the scent. There was something else, something warm and strange that made Mira feel calm. Elena slowly reached into her pack and pulled out a food bar. She broke off a piece and held it out in her open palm. The cubs froze. They looked at each other with their yellow eyes, communicating in the silent way that all pack animals do. Then Mira crept forward and sniffed the offered food. She took it. After that, the cubs came to visit Elena every day. They would watch her work from the rocks above her camp. They would creep closer when she was alone and run away when the adult hunters passed by. Elena gave them treats and spoke to them in a soft voice. She did not try to touch them. She let them come to her on their own terms. Korath learned about these visits from his mate. Vela was furious that the cubs were spending time with the human. She demanded that Korath kill Elena before the cubs became weak, but Korath was not so certain. He watched his cubs from a distance. They did not seem weak to him. They seemed more curious, more observant. They were learning patience from the human, a skill that would serve them well in the hunt. 3 weeks after Elena arrived, there was an accident. She was examining some rock samples from a cave on the edge of the Vorak territory. The rocks were sharp, and she was not paying attention. She scraped her hand against a jagged edge and cut her palm. The wound was not deep. By human standards, it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Elena pulled out her medical kit and prepared to clean and bandage the cut. But the cubs smelled the blood. They came running from the rocks where they had been hiding. All 3 of them appeared at once, their young bodies trembling with excitement. Elena froze. She had read about the Vorak reaction to blood. It was supposed to trigger their hunting instinct, to drive them into a frenzy that could not be stopped until they had killed their prey. She waited for the attack. It never came. Instead, Mira walked slowly toward her. The young cub's nose was twitching rapidly, taking in the scent of Elena's blood. Her siblings followed close behind, equally mesmerized by the smell. Elena held perfectly still as Mira approached her injured hand. The cub lowered her head and sniffed the blood that had pooled in Elena's palm. Then she licked it. Elena gasped. The sensation was strange, rough and warm. Mira's tongue scraped gently across her palm, cleaning the blood from the wound. The other 2 cubs joined in, taking turns licking the small cut until no trace of blood remained. Then they sat down around Elena and looked up at her with their big yellow eyes. They did not hunt that night. When Korath came to gather his cubs for the evening hunt, he found them curled up around the human, sleeping peacefully. Elena was sitting with her back against a rock, her injured hand resting on Mira's soft gray fur. She looked up at the pack leader and waited for his response. Korath did not know what to make of this scene. His cubs had tasted blood, yet they had not hunted. They had been close enough to kill the human with a single swipe of their claws, yet they had chosen to protect her instead. He approached slowly and sniffed the air. There was something in the human's blood, something he did not recognize. It was not fear. It was not weakness. It was something else entirely. The other adults in the pack were disturbed by what had happened. They gathered around the camp and demanded an explanation. How could the cubs have tasted blood and not hunted? It was against their nature. It was against everything they had been taught. Some of the warriors suggested that the human had poisoned the cubs, that she had used some kind of chemical weapon to suppress their instincts. Elena explained what she believed had happened. Human blood contained certain compounds that were not found in any other species in the galaxy. One of these compounds was called oxytocin. In humans, it was released during moments of trust and bonding. It was the chemical that made mothers love their children, that made friends feel connected, that made strangers feel safe with one another. When the cubs licked her blood, they had absorbed some of this compound into their systems. The oxytocin had not suppressed their hunting instinct. It had simply given them a choice. For the first time in their lives, the cubs had felt something stronger than the urge to kill. They had felt connection. They had felt peace. They had felt what humans called love. Korath listened to the explanation in silence. When Elena finished speaking, he walked over to where his cubs were still sleeping. He looked down at Mira, who had her small paw resting on Elena's leg. The pack leader reached out with one massive clawed hand and gently stroked his daughter's fur. He understood. The Vorak were hunters because they had never known anything else. Their biology drove them to kill. Their society rewarded strength and punished weakness. They had built an entire civilization around the hunt because they had never been shown another way to live. But Elena had shown the cubs something different. She had shown them that strength could also mean gentleness. She had shown them that power could also mean protection. Korath made a decision that night that would change the history of his species. He invited Elena to stay. Over the next several months, Elena worked with the Vorak scientists to understand the effects of human blood on their species. They discovered that the compounds in human blood could temporarily reduce aggression and increase social bonding. The effects were not permanent, but they were significant. Cubs who were exposed to human blood during their formative years grew up to be more patient, more thoughtful, more capable of complex social interactions. The Galactic Council was stunned when the Vorak ambassador proposed a new treaty with the Human Alliance. For the first time in their history, the Vorak were offering peace instead of conquest. They were asking for cultural exchange instead of hunting rights. They were requesting that human doctors and scientists be allowed to work on Karath Prime to help them understand their own biology. The other species in the council could not believe what they were hearing. The Vorak, the most feared hunters in the galaxy, were asking for help. They were admitting that they wanted to change, all because one small human woman had cut her hand on a rock. Elena returned to Karath Prime many times over the following years. She watched Mira grow from a curious cub into a strong young hunter. But Mira was not like the hunters who had come before her. She hunted only when necessary. She protected the weak instead of preying on them. She became the first Vorak to earn a seat on the Galactic Council, where she spoke for peace and cooperation between all species. When other aliens asked Mira what had changed her, she would think back to that night when she was young. She would remember the taste of Elena's blood on her tongue, the warmth she had felt curled up against the human's side. She would remember the choice she had made to protect instead of hunt. And she would smile, showing her massive fangs, and say that sometimes the greatest strength was found in the smallest moments of kindness. That sometimes blood could connect instead of divide. That sometimes the universe changed not through war or conquest, but through one small cut on a gentle hand. The humans had given the Vorak something they had never had before. They had given them a choice, and that had made all the difference.